To most people, winning the lottery is a dream come true.
You just won $250,000.
But after winning £1 million as a 17-year-old, Jane Park says the lottery ruined her life.
You had stalkers, death threats, people hiding in the bushes, commentating on everything you were doing.
After spending her money on a new house, luxurious vacations, a purple Range Rover, and plastic surgery, she was left with crushing depression, which made her wish she'd never won.
When Jane did win the lottery, she was sitting here and I'm sitting now crying.
What's your problem?
Now, you might just say this was a dumb teenager acting irresponsibly, but it turns out Jane's story isn't exactly uncommon. In fact, up to 70% of all lottery winners go broke within a few years of winning. As crazy as it sounds, you could even say that Jane was lucky compared to some of the other winners, many of whom ended up with mountains of debt, crippling addictions, or even murdered in cold blood. That's why some people call it the curse of the lottery, and it can turn a dream come true into a nightmare.
What do you think about this concept, the curse of the lottery?
Today, Jane calls her experience a dark, twisted fairy tale. But that's not how she felt in the beginning. When she first realised she'd won £1 million, she was thrilled.
So I've stuck the ticket like down my top and ran home like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
Who wouldn't be? Overnight, she went from living in public housing and making £8 an hour to having more money than most adults have.
In my mind, I felt like I was a billionaire. I felt like I was going to be like Kim Kardashian.
She went on lavish vacations. She partied with her friends and bought designer clothes and handbags. But she didn't feel like she looked the part.
I hated the way my body looked.
So she decided to go under the knife.
I've had my breasts enhanced, 2 Brazilian bum lifts, the lip filler, and I've had Botox.
She nearly died from sepsis during the first operation, but that didn't stop her from getting a second one.
Like, I could have died.
And you did another similar procedure again after that?
Yeah, I done the exact same procedure again.
Sure, she survived, but she was still unhappy. The truth was, she was overwhelmed by all of the media attention.
Journalists were tapping on my door, there was cameramen hiding in bushes outside.
And pretty soon, she started to spiral out of control. It was her aunt who eventually convinced her to invest in a house, but that didn't make her happy either.
I had this massive house and I lived in it alone and felt lonely. I cried myself to sleep like every night.
In the end, Jane wishes that she'd never won at all, and she even goes as far as to say she shouldn't have been allowed to buy a ticket in the first place.
I remember my nana saying, it's like giving a kid a gun in the hand and not telling them what to do with it.
In fact, she even wanted to sue the company that gave her the £1 million. Imagine suing someone for giving you loads of money. But she's not the only lottery winner that feels that way. 16-year-old Callie Rogers was even younger when she won her prize of nearly £2 million. And the effect it had on her was eerily similar to Jane.
To anyone to win £1.87 million, this is the best thing that could ever have happened to me. But you genuinely do wish it never did, don't you?
Yeah.
Overwhelmed by what seemed like an infinite amount of money, Callie went on a shopping spree.
She spent £18,000 on 3 boob jobs,
Yeah.
£300,000 on clothes,
Yeah.
and £500,000 in gifts.
And that didn't include the estimated £250,000 she spent on drugs. Like Jane, the money left her feeling worse than before. You see, the problem was, Callie didn't know who her real friends were and who was just trying to get money from her. She felt vulnerable.
So still at 31 now, I still really struggle with trust issues.
She was just 16 and people took advantage of her.
Most people have a hard time saying no to the people that they care about.
And that led to anxiety and depression. In 2021, after driving while high on cocaine, she crashed her car and subsequently had her license revoked. At that point, that meant she had no more money left and no driving license. Not to mention 4 children to take care of, and now she was entirely dependent on government welfare. Was this the curse? Callie and Jane both blame the lottery system for catering to kids.
Yeah, I think at 16 you're still just a child and you don't have any understanding of money and the concept of it and what it brings with it as well.
And they may have a point. We all know teenagers tend to make rash decisions. The flood of money and fame can be intoxicating to anyone, let alone a 16-year-old. But while raising the age might help, it wouldn't have been enough to stop this next guy. He squandered all his money on booze, women, and illegal substances.
Hi, my name is Mikey Carroll, and 10 years ago I won £9.7 million on the National Lottery, and I've hit the headlines ever since.
So Michael was 19 years old and already married when he won £9.7 million back in 2002. But that didn't stop the money from going to his head. You see, it wasn't hard for Michael to decide how to spend his winnings.
What have you done with your money?
Sex, drugs and booze.
Sex, drugs and booze?
His money quickly started evaporating.
Well, the height of my drugs, I was spending $2,000 a day, and that was just on cocaine. Prostitutes, I was spending about £1,000 a day, I think.
And a few years later, his marriage was over too. To be honest, I'm not sure what took her so long to leave. Michael claims that he slept with over 4,000 women during his 10-year binge. He'd start every day by taking drugs and drinking an entire bottle of vodka. Now, it's one thing to destroy your own life, but Michael soon developed a reputation for also becoming a menace to his neighbours. At one stage, he was even arrested for threatening teenagers with a baseball bat at a nightclub. Now, to the relief of many, in 2013, Michael's money finally ran out. But Michael had hit rock bottom. Unable to find work due to his bad boy reputation, he ended up living in shelters for homeless people for a few months, right up until he got his old job back as a trash collector.
Did you feel cursed?
In a way.
Yeah, cursed with a lack of self-control. In Michael's case, he'd already started becoming a bad boy before he'd won. He was even wearing an electronic tag when he picked up his check. But £9.7 million definitely poured fuel on the fire, and it makes sense.
Quite often, money complicates everything. For example, if you've had a substance abuse problem in the past, now you have endless means.
Which is exactly what happened to Michael. But what about those winners who didn't start out as hooligans? Jack Whittaker was 55 when he won the Powerball jackpot of $315 million. Unlike Michael Carroll, Jack was already wealthy from the $17 million construction company he'd built from scratch.
I can take this much money and do a lot of good with this much money right now.
But in the end, neither his age nor his business experience could save him from what happened next. The guy started off with good intentions. He donated $23 million to build 2 churches. But the power of his money proved to be toxic.
I pretty much lost everything I held dear in my life.
What really mattered to him was his family, particularly his 17-year-old granddaughter Brandy. And after he won, he couldn't help but spoil her with gifts.
I gave her about $2,000 a week.
He also bought her cars.
How many?
4.
So he's a 17-year-old with 4 cars.
Sadly, there was a dark side to Jack's generosity. Brandy and her boyfriend started taking drugs and soon became hooked.
She told me one time, she said, "Papa, all I care about is drugs."
Despite Jack's best attempts to help them get treatment, her boyfriend would eventually die from an overdose. And a few months later, Brandy disappeared. As you can imagine, this left Jack frantic and fearing the worst.
After 5 days, I just knew that she had to be dead or she would have been contacting me.
Since winning the jackpot, Jack's life had fallen apart. His wife had left him. He had developed drinking and gambling problems. And he was also robbed for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's not to mention the 2 drunk driving charges and the accusations of assaulting multiple female casino workers. It's sad. Jack had wanted to do good with his $315 million. But in the end, he felt cursed.
Where does this ever end?
Well,
don't know where it'll end, but, you know, I don't like Jack Whittaker.
But as terrible as Jack's life turned out to be, at least he had a life. Not all lottery winners are so lucky.
Murdered for money. The story of local lottery winner Abraham Shakespeare captivated the nation. He was murdered 3 years after he took home $17 million.
When 30-year-old Abraham Shakespeare won $30 million back in 2006, people started asking him for money. That was to be expected. It's one of the side effects of winning. But Abraham had trouble dealing with all the attention.
I really would like my old life back where I could walk the streets like a normal person.
But he must have felt a sense of responsibility to the people around him. After paying off his own mortgage, he helped out several of his friends and family. In fact, he even paid off mortgages for people he didn't know.
Do you get tired of people asking you for money all the time, Abe?
They don't take no for an ounce or so.
Then he disappeared. It turns out he'd been murdered by this woman who claimed to be his friend. After burying him in her backyard, Doris D.D. Moore tried to convince his family that he was just missing. She even had someone call his mum pretending to be Abraham, but his mum didn't buy it.
He said, "It's Abraham." And I said, "Well, you don't sound like Abraham."
So, next, she forged a letter that was supposed to be from him. The only problem was, she didn't know that Abraham couldn't read or write. Finally, she got so desperate that she tried to bribe the detective investigating her.
She told me that she could get a free room at the Hard Rock Casino and her perform sexual acts on me.
Yeah, interesting choice. Unsurprisingly, she was convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder.
But the damage was already done. Abraham was dead. Whether you call it a curse or just the power of greed, Abraham's murder shows just how ugly the lottery can get. But that's not going to stop people from playing. In fact, Abraham's family recently had a stroke of good luck.
Shakespeare's former girlfriend and the mother of his teenage son has now won the lottery.
Abraham's former girlfriend got to hold the giant check, not once, but twice. The second time round, it was all hers. The family was ecstatic. I guess only time will tell if that money will prove to be a blessing or a curse.